Welcome to the Hindu Daily. Okay, let's dive into today's sources. We're looking for those critical shifts, the stories behind the headlines. And we're starting with something huge for the Indian economy, the IT sector. It's always been seen as, well, the golden calf, right? About 7% of GDP, a path to prosperity.
Absolutely, the golden ticket for many.
But then you see TCS announcing its steepest layoffs ever, 20,000 jobs cut in just one quarter. So the big question is that IT dream, flickering? Or is something deeper going on, a structural change?
It's definitely the second one. This isn't some sudden collapse. It's a profound metamorphosis, really.
Yeah.
And it's not just India. Look globally. Amazon, Meta, they've had huge cuts, partly driven by AI.
Right.
Here, the picture's complicated by these silent layoffs. Things like performance exits, holding back promotions. Industry folks estimate this could affect maybe 50,000 jobs, perhaps even more this fiscal year.
Wow.
So, yeah, the core idea is that the big middle part of that traditional outsourcing pyramid, it's being hollowed out structurally.
So if I'm hearing you right, the takeaway is pretty stark. AI and policy shifts are kind of teaming up to eliminate the very jobs that used to be the bedrock of stability for so many. What are the specifics driving that?
Well, AI is definitely the big disruptor. But we need to be specific. It's not just automating simple stuff anymore. We're seeing the rise of what's called agentic AI.
Agentic AI.
Yeah, think of systems that go beyond just following code. They can actually sort of reason, plan, and carry out complex tasks on their own, like running entire reporting processes or debugging common issues without human intervention.
Okay, that's a big leap.
It is. And it fundamentally changes what the industry needs. It's shifting from needing lots of manpower to needing a high-value mind power.
And technology doesn't exist in a vacuum, right? It's hitting alongside cost pressures and policy changes, making that old outsourcing model shaky.
Exactly right. Policy shifts, especially things like stricter U.S. immigration rules. Hiking H-1B visa fees, it forces companies to hire locally in the U.S.
Which costs more.
Way more. So sending someone over for routine tasks, that model just doesn't make financial sense anymore. And clients feel it too. They're tightening budgets. They're not asking for armies of coders now. They want very specific high-value stuff, cybersecurity expertise, help with generative AI architecture.
That puts incredible pressure on people mid-career, doesn't it? If you spent, say, the last 15 years becoming an expert in something like SAP ECC.
Yeah, that's the painful reality. If your skills are tied to older legacy systems, you're facing potential obsolescence unless you adapt, and fast.
And many promoted to management might lack the current tech depth.
That's often the case. They might have moved away from the hands-on tech. So the solution has to be massive, urgent upskilling. TCS, for example, has upskilled over 500,000 employees in basic AI. That's huge.
But corporate efforts alone aren't enough.
Probably not. We need serious curriculum reform in engineering schools. Machine learning, AI ethics, this needs to be taught from day one. And look, if we do face large-scale job losses, we need to talk about social safety nets. Maybe government mandates for, say, 6 to 9 months of severance pay in mass layoffs. Give people breathing room to reskill.
That transition from manpower to mind power, it's clearly a tough road.
Yeah.
Okay, let's switch gears now from economic shifts to environmental ones. Because there's a really surprising paradox in India's energy story.
Ah, yes, the grid emissions.
Exactly. We've done amazing work installing clean energy. Non-fossil capacity is now 50% of our total installed capacity. Fantastic headline.
It is.
But, and this is the paradox, the actual carbon intensity of our electricity, the grid emission factor, GEF, has actually gone up in the last 5 years.
How can more clean energy lead to a dirtier grid overall?
It boils down to what we call the capacity generation mismatch. Capacity is just potential what's installed. Generation is what actually gets produced and used.
Solar and wind, despite those big capacity numbers, have low utilization factors. They run maybe 15% to 25% of the time, on average. Compare that to coal or nuclear, they run 65%, even up to 90% of the time.
So the actual electricity delivered tells a different story.
It does. Last year, renewables only supplied about 22% of the actual electricity generated.
So capacity gets the headlines, but generation is where the carbon rubber meets the road. For listeners, what does that GEF number actually mean?
Simply put, the GEF, it's measured in tons of CO2 per megawatt hour, TCO-MWH, tells you how much carbon pollution is associated with the average unit of electricity you use. It's like the carbon footprint of flipping your light switch.
And ours went up from 0.723 to 0.727 TCO-MWH. Why?
Timing. It's all about timing. Demand spikes in the evening, right when everyone gets home, turns on lights, ACs.
Just as solar power is fading out for the day?
Precisely. So what fills the gap instantly? Fossil fuels, mostly coal. Coal plants are the system's shock absorbers, ramping up quickly to meet that evening peak. And that locks in higher overall emissions for the grid.
So the answer isn't just building more solar farms, it's about managing that demand peak itself.
Exactly. This is where energy efficiency comes in. It's often called the first fuel because saving energy is like generating clean energy.
How so?
Efficiency helps flatten those demand peaks. If buildings are better insulated, if appliances use less power, the evening surge isn't as high. That means less need to fire up those high-emission coal plants.
And the numbers back this up.
Hugely. The Bureau of Energy Efficiency estimates that between 2017 and 2023, efficiency measures saved India about 1.29 gigatons of CO2 equivalent. It's massive. And nearly 760,000 crore in avoided energy costs.
Wow, 760,000 crore saved. That's staggering. It makes you wonder if the benefits are that crystal clear, why isn't there more urgency? Like mandating five-star appliance standards faster or more aggressive efficiency programs. What's the holdup?
Well, there's often pushback. Perceived upfront costs for consumers, buying a slightly more expensive but much more efficient fridge. Industry resistance sometimes too.
So what's needed policy-wise?
We need policies that really focus on flexibility. Accelerating those appliance standards is key. Helping small, medium businesses adopt efficient motors, that's big too. And crucially, things like connecting consumer batteries from homes, maybe EVs, into virtual power plants, VPPs.
VPPs.
Yeah, imagine the grid being able to draw a little power from thousands of connected batteries during peak hours. Instead of firing up a coal plant, it smooths everything out. And we also need flexible tariffs rewarding you, the consumer, for shifting your electricity use away from those peak, high-emission times.
Interesting. Okay, we've talked about economic pressures in India. Let's take that lens now and look at the American political economy, because there seems to be another big systemic issue driving things there: simple affordability.
That's right. It's becoming a really powerful political force. You mentioned Zohran Mamdani's campaign, I saw that too, using Mango Lassi to explain ranked choice voting while talking to Trump voters about rent control. It's fascinating.
It cuts across traditional lines, focusing squarely on economic anxiety.
And the data shows why that resonates so strongly. Think about this. Since the year 2000, median income in the U.S. has grown only 7%.
Wait, just 7% over more than 2 decades.
7%. Meanwhile, the Consumer Price Index, basically the cost of everything, housing, food, healthcare, has jumped 60%.
60? Wow. So inflation has outpaced income growth almost 10 times over since 2000. That's not just anxiety, that's people falling behind, mathematically.
It absolutely is. It translates into real hardship. Another stark number, 40% of children in the U.S. are now born on Medicaid. That's a pretty clear indicator of functional poverty, of families struggling to make ends meet.
And this isn't new, right? It's been building regardless of who's president.
Exactly. That
Yeah.
breeds this deep frustration, this feeling that the system isn't working for ordinary people. And that shared financial squeeze is actually starting to bring together groups that you wouldn't normally see agreeing on much.
Yeah, it's striking that this affordability message isn't just coming from the progressive left, the Sanders or AOC wing. It's also getting picked up by figures on the right, like Marjorie Taylor Greene or Tucker Carlson.
That's the affordability bridge in action. It seems like basic economic insecurity, the struggle to pay bills, is starting to overshadow some of the cultural flashpoints in immigration, woke issues that have dominated politics for so long.
So class is making a comeback, in a way.
It seems like it. And there's this broad distrust of the establishment on both sides. Polls show something like 7 out of 10 Americans think Democrats are out of touch, and 6 out of 10 feel the same about Republicans or Trump.
A shared sense the system isn't serving them.
Precisely. That shared economic anxiety is becoming perhaps the most critical lens for understanding American politics right now.
That shift from culture wars back to kitchen table economics, that's a really important narrative to watch. Okay, let's bring that idea of systemic costs back home to India, but focus on environmental costs this time. Specifically, a worrying discovery about heavy metal pollution in the Cauvery River.
Yes, this was quite an alarming study. Researchers looked at 18 sites along the river and found significant contamination. We're talking chromium, cadmium, copper, lead, zinc, found in both the river sediments and in the fish.
And at levels that pose a risk.
Yes, the levels exceeded recognized thresholds for both cancer risk and other non-carcinogenic health risks. Cadmium and lead were flagged as the biggest concerns.
Now, some heavy metals occur naturally. Is this just background levels, or is it something else?
The evidence points strongly towards human activity. The levels are high, they vary a lot between sites, and that pattern is really indicative of industrial pollution.
From where specifically?
The study points towards industrial effluents. particularly from textile factories and electroplating units. There seems to be a concentration of this near the erode stretch of the Cauvery. But it's not just industry agricultural runoff carrying pesticides and fertilizers, and untreated sewage from towns and cities are also major contributors. It's a chemical mix.
So what does this mean for people living along the river, especially those who eat the fish regularly?
The main concern is bioaccumulation. These metals don't just pass through. They build up in the bodies of fish over time. And then when people eat the fish, the metals build up in their bodies too.
It's a cumulative risk then.
Exactly. Prolonged exposure is the worry. Now, the study did estimate that eating fish, say twice a week, around 250 grams per serving, was considered safe based on their specific risk calculations.
I sense a but coming.
Well, yes. Other earlier research looking at common fish species caught in the region found that the target hazard quotient, THQ, for several metals, including cadmium and lead, was actually above 1.
And THQ over 1 is the official threshold for concern, right? That signals a potential health hazard.
Correct. A THQ above 1 suggests that the level of exposure could lead to adverse health effects over time. So there's conflicting data, but the fact that multiple studies across different fish species are finding these elevated heavy metals, it tells you this is a real systemic problem in the Cauvery watershed.
So the takeaway is pretty urgent.
Absolutely. It means we need continuous monitoring of water and fish quality. We need much stricter enforcement of regulations on industrial discharge, and we need policy interventions to clean up wastewater and agricultural runoff. It's a serious public health issue.
From the chemistry of rivers to the physics of animal movement, let's jump to biomechanics and talk about kangaroos. It's always been a bit of a biological puzzle, hasn't it? How they hop faster without using significantly more energy.
Yeah, it defies the usual rules where running faster costs more energy metabolically. We've known for a long time that their massive Achilles tendon acts like a spring, storing and returning elastic energy.
Like a pogo stick.
Kind of, yeah. But that passive spring effect alone wasn't enough to fully explain just how efficient they are, especially at higher speeds.
So what's the new insight?
The latest research, using detailed 3D motion analysis, suggests it's not just passive recoil. Kangaroos actively use their posture to tweak the leverage at their ankle joint as they speed up.
Okay, how does changing posture give you free speed?
So researchers tracked kangaroos hopping at different speeds, from a slow 2 meters per second up to 4.5 meters per second. They found that as the kangaroo goes faster, it actually bends its legs more when its foot hits the ground.
Bends them more? You'd think that would be less efficient.
Right, but here's the clever bit. This increased bend changes the geometry at the ankle. The ankle itself bends upward more, but at the same time, the kangaroo presses its toes down harder into the ground.
Okay. And that does what?
That specific combination of movements pulls the Achilles tendon much harder, stretching it more taut.
Like pulling back a stronger rubber band the faster you go.
Exactly. It maximizes the amount of elastic energy stored in the tendon with each hop, and therefore maximizes the energy returned, propelling them forward.
And the free part?
The genius part is that the total amount of work the ankle joint itself has to do per hop stays almost constant, even as speed increases. The tendon takes on the extra mechanical load required for higher speed, so the muscles don't need to burn much extra fuel. The tendon does the heavy lifting, metabolically speaking.
That is genuinely elegant biological engineering. But surely there's a trade-off to pushing tendons that hard.
There likely is. Operating those tendons so close to their maximum elastic capacity probably means there's a very small safety margin before they risk injury or failure. This might be one reason why kangaroos have a sort of upper limit on their size. And it could also explain why they aren't great at making sharp, sudden turns at high speed. Those tendons are optimized for straight-line efficiency, not agility under stress.
Fascinating stuff. Okay, let's move into our text and context section. And we're back to humans trying to engineer nature specifically. The recent cloud seeding trials in Delhi aimed at tackling smog. First serious attempt in a long time, right?
Yeah, nearly 50 years since the last major trials there, I believe. It sounds very high-tech, but the basic idea is pretty straightforward. You fly a plane into pseudo clouds and spray a substance, usually a salt mixture like silver iodide or calcium chloride.
To do what exactly?
The particles act as nuclei, encouraging tiny water droplets or ice crystals in the cloud to clump together, to coalesce. The goal is to make them heavy enough to fall as rain or snow.
And India has a history with this.
It does, actually, way back in 1952 near Kolkata. Though honestly, the results from those early experiments were pretty hard to verify scientifically.
So what's the solid science baseline for Indy now? I gather the AI PICS experiment was key.
Absolutely. KIPEAKS, that stands for Cloud Aerosol Interaction and Precipitation Enhancement Experiment, ran for about a decade, from 2009 to 2019, mainly over Solapur in Maharashtra. It was a very systematic study.
And what did KPX find? Did seeding actually work?
It did, under the right conditions. They found that when they seeded suitable clouds with calcium chloride flares, those clouds produced, on average, 46% more rain compared to similar unseeded clouds nearby.
46% more rain is significant.
Very. They estimated it resulted in about 867 million liters of extra water over the region during the experiment period. So it provided solid evidence that, yes, cloud seeding can enhance rainfall, given the right atmospheric conditions.
Okay, so if the science works, why did the recent flights over Delhi on October 28th, the ones involving IIT Kanpur, fail to actually make it rain?
Yeah, that was the disappointing part. It really came down to the quality of the clouds, as the reports put it, meaning they just didn't have the right ingredients. KPEAK showed you need clouds with sufficient moisture, typically the kind you find during the monsoon season. The clouds over Delhi during that post-monsoon period simply lacked that deep moisture content. So even though they sprayed the seeding agent, there wasn't enough water vapor available in the clouds to coalesce into raindrops. You can't, as the saying goes, squeeze water from a dry sponge, even if you add salt. The atmospheric conditions just weren't right.
Right, conditions are everything. Okay, staying with global policy and managing shared resources, let's discuss a really significant development, the High Seas Treaty, officially known as the Biodiversity Beyond National Jurisdiction, or BBNJ agreement.
Yes, this is a landmark agreement. It's been ratified by over 60 countries now and is set to come into force in January 2026. It's the first real attempt to create a comprehensive legal framework for conserving and sustainably using marine life in areas beyond national waters.
Which is a huge part of the planet.
It is about 2/3 of the ocean, actually. The treaty basically sets up rules for activities in these vast areas. It rests on three main pillars.
Okay, what are they?
First, it deals with marine genetic resources, MGRs, essentially, the genetic material from marine organisms. The treaty frames these as the common heritage of humankind.
Common heritage. That sounds important. What else?
Second, it establishes mechanisms for creating area-based management tools, ABMTs. The most well-known type is marine protected areas, MPAs, basically, setting aside specific zones for conservation. And third, it mandates environmental impact assessments, EIAs, for activities that could potentially harm marine life in the high seas.
Okay, that framework sounds sensible, but that term common heritage of humankind for MGRs, does that clash with older ideas about the ocean?
It absolutely does. That's where the core tension lies. The common heritage principle implies that the benefits derived from these resources, say, discovering a new pharmaceutical compound from a deep-sea sponge, should be shared equitably among all nations, especially developing ones.
But the traditional principle was?
The freedom of the high seas, which basically meant nations, particularly those with the resources like research vessels and labs, had largely unrestricted rights to explore and exploit resources out there.
So developing nations worry about biopiracy.
Precisely. They fear that richer nations will harvest these potentially valuable MGRs, patent them, profit from them, and not share the benefits or the knowledge gained. How exactly the benefit sharing from MGRs will work is still a major point of uncertainty and potential conflict.
And like any global treaty, its success really depends on who's actually signed up and playing by the rules.
That's the other huge challenge. The treaty's effectiveness is seriously undermined if major maritime powers don't ratify it. And currently, key players like the United States, China, and Russia haven't signed on.
Why not?
Concerns likely range from the MGR benefit-sharing rules, potentially hindering their biotech industries, to restrictions on fishing or seabed mining, to general reluctance to cede national freedoms to an international framework. Their non-participation really weakens the treaty's ability to govern the high seas effectively.
Right. It needs buy-in from the big players.
Yeah.
Okay, our next source tackles another issue around shared resources, but this time it's knowledge, the public ownership of scientific research. The core issue seems pretty straightforward, almost unfair.
It does feel fundamentally unfair to many. The basic problem is this. Public money, through taxes funding universities and research grants, pays for the vast majority of scientific research. Researchers do the work, often write the papers for free. Colleagues peer review them for free.
And then?
And then commercial academic publishers take that work, put it behind a paywall, and charge hefty subscription fees to the very same institutions, universities, libraries, hospitals, whose researchers produce the knowledge in the first place. So the public effectively pays twice, once to fund the research and again to access the results.
The open access movement tried to fix this, didn't it?
It did. The Budapest Open Access Initiative back in 2002 was a key moment. The idea was to make research freely available online. But the major publishers adapted very shrewdly.
Yeah.
They largely shifted their business model. Instead of charging readers via subscriptions, many now charge authors article processing charges, APCs, to publish their work open access.
Ah, shifting the cost to the creator.
Exactly. And these APCs can be incredibly high, anywhere from $2,000 to sometimes over $10,000 for a single paper in a top journal. So it just created a different kind of access barrier. Researchers or institutions that can't afford the APCs are priced out of publishing in these venues, even if their work is excellent.
So India's trying something with the One Nation, One Subscription, or ONUS initiative.
Yes, ONOS is set to start in 2025. The idea is for the government to negotiate national-level subscription deals, giving all public institutions access to a wide range of journals. It aims to tackle the subscription cost barrier.
But does it address the deeper issue?
That's the critical question the source raises. Even with ONOS, we're still potentially paying huge sums of money, likely millions, to largely foreign-based commercial publishers for access to knowledge that was often generated right here in India, using Indian public funds. It asks, is this really compatible with the spirit of Atmanirbhar Bharat, of self-reliance?
It's a powerful point, paying others for what we created.
And the situation is evolving. Publishers have found yet another way to monetize this content. They're now selling bulk access to their vast archives of scholarly articles to big tech companies.
To do what?
To train artificial intelligence models. There was a mention of Taylor and Francis reportedly having a $10 million deal with Microsoft for this purpose. So the research output, created by academics often for free, is being monetized yet again, first through subscriptions or APCs, and now as data for AI, generally without any compensation or control going back to the original authors or their institutions.
That feels exploitative. So given this landscape, what can individual researchers or authors actually do? Do they have any power to reclaim control or ensure their work stays open?
They do have options, and it's important authors know them. The article suggests 3 key actions. First, self-archive. Authors almost always retain the right to post a preprint or an accepted manuscript version of their paper in an open repository, like their university's archive or a public one like Arski. Do it consistently.
Okay, self-archiving. What else?
Second, negotiate the contract. Before signing the publisher's copyright transfer agreement, authors can request an addendum. There are templates available, like the Spark Author Addendum, that help authors retain key rights, like the right to reuse their work or post it openly after a certain period. Don't just sign away all rights by default.
Right, read the fine print and push back. And the third action?
Third, advocate for institutional policies. Encourage your university or research funder to adopt strong rights retention policies. These policies often state that the institution automatically gets a non-exclusive license to the author's accepted manuscript, ensuring it can be made open access. And critically, when choosing a license, authors should push for the least restrictive option, ideally the CC-BY license.
CC-BY.
Creative Commons Attribution. It allows anyone to reuse the work freely for any purpose, as long as they give credit to the original author. Publishers often prefer more restrictive licenses that limit reuse. Pushing for CC-BY is key to maximizing the public benefit of publicly funded research.
That's really practical advice for academics listening. Okay, let's wrap up with the business section. A significant shift here in India's crude oil import strategy. We seem to be actively moving away from Russian crude. What's behind this?
The main trigger appears to be the additional 25% tariff that the United States imposed back in August on purchasers of Russian oil. That significantly changed the economics.
And we're seeing the impact in the numbers?
We are. The data for September 2025 shows a really sharp drop. Russian crude imports were down almost 29% compared to the same month the previous year. That pushed Russia's overall share of India's crude imports below 1/3, down from over 40% just a few months prior. That's a big shift in a short time.
So if we're buying less from Russia, where is India turning to fill that gap? It's a huge amount of oil we need.
There's a clear strategy of diversification underway. We're seeing increased imports from our more traditional suppliers, Saudi Arabia, the UAE, the US. But importantly, India is also actively bringing in more oil from other sources. Nigeria, Turkey, Libya, Egypt, these are featuring more prominently now.
Spreading the risk, essentially.
Exactly. Broadening the supplier base to reduce dependence on any single source, especially one facing geopolitical pressures and sanctions. The share of imports from the Middle East and Africa, collectively, is rising noticeably.
But this diversification, the strategic realignment, it comes at a price, right? Russian barrels were notoriously cheap for a while.
They were. That was the pragmatic appeal. Russian crude was reportedly available at around $500 per ton. The substitutes we're buying now from the Middle East, Africa, or the U.S. are significantly more expensive.
How much more?
Well, the example given was Libyan crude, costing around $602 per ton. That's over $100 more per ton compared to the previous Russian price point. That's a substantial difference when you're importing millions of tons.
So essentially, India is paying a premium for geopolitical alignment and supply chain security, possibly to comply with pressure from trading partners like the U.S. Does this signal that strategic stability is becoming more expensive than purely economic pragmatism?
That seems to be the trade-off India is navigating right now. This higher unit cost for crude oil inevitably puts pressure on Indian refineries' profit margins. And down the line, it could contribute to pressure on retail fuel prices, impacting inflation.
It's a complex balancing act.
It really is. We're making a strategic choice, diversifying supply, strengthening ties, but it comes with a tangible financial cost that will ripple through the economy.
It really feels like a common thread runs through almost everything we've discussed today, whether it's IT workers needing new skills, the grid needing flexibility, American voters demanding affordability, or India managing global trade pressures. Adaptation seems to be the key.
Yes, the ability to pivot seems crucial. Kangaroos adapting their posture, IT workers needing to learn agentic AI, energy systems needing to integrate efficiency and storage.
And on the flip side, those who can't adapt easily, maybe due to lack of access to skills, knowledge, or facing the direct costs of pollution, like in the Cauvery, they face increasingly urgent challenges.
That's absolutely right. The costs of not adapting or being unable to are becoming very high.
Thank you for listening. If you want to provide suggestions, please contact on the Twitter handle given in the episode description. As always, we are eager to hear what our listeners want to be informed about. We wish you a great day.